You're watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
My father, as a young man, was very far from the centrist Orthodox person that he was in his rabbinic career and later in life. He told me as a youngster he used to picket the kosher butcher stores on the Lower East Side because their standards were not high enough. I think he learned centrism and moderation from my great-grandfather, whose inclination in deciding matters of Jewish law was to be lenient, to say kosher rather than treif, to say mutar, permitted, rather than asur, prohibited. A poignant example. One early Friday afternoon, my father was in the home of Rabbi Margolies when a woman came in to show my great-grandfather a chicken with a hole in its stomach, a sure sign that the chicken was treif. Rabbi Margolies took the chicken and called my father into the library for a private conference. "So what do you think, mein Kind?" he said to him. My father responded, "Well, it's pretty open and shut. This chicken obviously swallowed a needle, which made a hole in its stomach, and that's one of the 18 signs of treif." My great-grandfather said, "Let's not jump to conclusions." He proceeded to take a volume from the shelf and showed my father that in a roughly similar case, a late decisor of Jewish law, an achron, ruled leniently. He then took a second volume off the shelf and showed my father another example of leniency in such a case. He then said to my father, "Mein Kind, if we tell this poor woman that her chicken is treif, she's not going to have anything to eat this Shabbos. Let's rely on these great authorities, and you take a little responsibility on your shoulders, and I'll take a little on my shoulders, and let this woman have a good Shabbos." That kind of ruling was actually exactly what I learned from Rabbi Soloveitchik when we studied in rabbinical school the laws of kashrus prior to my getting smicha, ordination. He used to say to us, "It's no trick to say treif." My baba could say that too. My grandmother could say treif. Your job as rabbis is to find opinions which will allow you to say kosher. When a woman brings in a question about dishes that got mixed up, you don't simply say, "Throw them out." You try to find a way to say, it's okay. Now, obviously, you have to have standards. But that's what the leaning has to be. My own shlichut as a rabbi and educator rests on the shlichut of my father and my great-grandfather. It consists of 3 missions. First, Zionism. Second, communal involvement and activism. And third, a centrist open orthodoxy. I shall try to explain each briefly and try to offer implications for the wider community. First, Zionism. A passionate commitment to the people of Israel and the state of Israel. So passionate that if I open my little diary, I have here listed, you can't quite see it, on pages, I copy it each year. My wife thinks I'm absolutely crazy. I copy it over each year into a new diary, every single visit we've made to Israel. So far, I've been there 75 times. She's only been there 66 times. I was able to go 9 times. Yes, 9 times without her. I owe her 9. My Zionism is reflected in the way in which we teach our students in Ramaz and live Judaism in KJ. You can hear it in the fact that, for the most part, when we recite the prayer for the state of Israel in KJ, you can hear a pin drop. In general, we're a fairly quiet shul, not as quiet as my father would have liked it, but when that prayer is recited, or the prayer for the well-being of the soldiers of Israel, you can hear a pin drop, and I can tell you, I usually recite it. And if I see somebody talking, I stop. Because to me, that's the holiest part of the service. In the Shulchan Aruch, there are other parts that are the code of Jewish law. There are other parts that are more holy. But to me, that's something I want everybody's attention on. You can see the commitment to Zionism in the poster of Gilad Shalit, which hangs in the front of our main synagogue alongside the Holy Ark, so that nobody who enters our synagogue on Shabbat can possibly pray without confronting the fact that this 24-year-old soldier of the IDF has been held incommunicado for 1,592 days today. You know how I know the number? Because every single Shabbat, we change the number that it is that Shabbat in our Shabbat printed announcements. And we have it on the outside bulletin board so that anybody who passes by will remember that he's a captive of Hamas for 1,500, and this Shabbos it's going to be 95 days. And it says, we remember. I don't know why this isn't done in other places. I think it should be. If I could do one thing today and suggest to everybody in this room to be an agent, shlichut, to just go and make a suggestion, let's put Gilad Shalit's picture there. I'm not suggesting that we make the decision whether to give back soldiers or not give back soldiers. That's not our decision. That's the decision of a government in Israel, and I'm grateful I'm not Benjamin Netanyahu who has to make that decision, because it's very, very complicated. But one thing I know, we in America should be remembering at least once a week when we go to shul that this man, nobody's visited him in 5 years. If we don't, who's going to remember him? My commitment to the state of Israel is manifested also in my serious disagreement, and I hope people will not take offense, with those in America or throughout the diaspora who voice criticism of Israel publicly, of Israel and its leaders, from whichever side. It pains me deeply to hear some of my colleagues in other branches of Judaism being openly critical of the new law on immigration of Jews to Israel, the so-called Rotem law. Whatever weaknesses it may have, and I agree there are weaknesses, people are working on those weaknesses, led by Natan Sharansky and Beni Ish Shalom, to solve whatever weaknesses there are. I cannot understand, though, how American Jewish leaders can rail against Israeli actions at a time when the real concerns, which ought to unite us, are the existential dangers posed to Israel by a nuclear Iran, by Hezbollah, and by Hamas. And while Gilad Shalit languishes in solitary confinement, there are priorities, and one should be very careful to live by those priorities. I just heard John Ruskay say to the President's Council luncheon a few weeks ago that there are donors to UJA who are indicating that they're going to withhold their support because they disagree with current government policy. Ladies and gentlemen, We are talking here about the Jewish state. We're not talking about a shul where you don't agree with the rabbi and you say, I'm not going to give my annual gift to the shul because I don't like his sermons, or I don't like the way the chazan sings. This is the Jewish state and the safety and well-being of over 5 million Jews. How can somebody consider withholding support because he or she doesn't like the policies of the democratically elected government in power? It's their government. They live there. They elected the government. And therefore, we're going to withdraw our support because we don't like what they elected? As an American Jew, I have consistently supported whatever Israeli government is in power, elected by the citizens of Israel. I would like to help solve Israel's problems with the world, not exacerbate them. Rabbi Shlomo Chaim HaKohen Aviner, who is by all odds an extremist. He is the head of the yeshiva in the so-called Muslim quarter of Jerusalem. I say so-called because if you walk through the main street, you will see where the mezuzot were gouged out of the doorposts. Because before 1948, when the Arabs kicked us out of the Muslim quarter, it was known as the Rova HaMu'urav, the mixed quarter. So he is back in there and has his yeshiva and actually gets along very well with the Arabs, but he is way over on the right, politically and religiously. You know what? When Prime Minister Rabin was in office and negotiating the Oslo agreements, which were anathema to Rav Aviner, Rav Aviner wrote a poem entitled Ani Ohev Lomar Tfilah Lishlom Hamadina. I love to say the prayer for the state of Israel. And he said clearly in that poem, Ki zot hamadina sheli, because this is my state. V'zot hamemshala sheli, and this is my government. The government that he disagreed with completely. But he says it's my government. I may disagree with it, so when election day comes, I'll vote against it. But right now, it's my government. How can Americans not have that view about the government of Israel? By the way, Rav Aviner wrote these words a couple of months before the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. He warned against Peirud Levavot, the ripping apart of hearts. He said it could lead to making the other inhuman and maybe physical attack and, God forbid, death. He spoke those words on Arutz Sheva a week before Rabin, Olav HaShalom, was assassinated. We have to understand that we have to be united in the support of Israel. Humbly, I join with the late Menachem Begin, who in Israel, when he was in the opposition, was the fiercest opponent of the labor government up until 1977 when he was elected. But when he came to the United States, you didn't hear a peep out of him in criticism of the Israeli government. And when he was asked, Mr. Begin, why don't you speak out here the way you speak out in Israel? He answered, in Israel, I will say whatever I have to say. But in America, I do not criticize the government of Israel because I don't want to give any member of Congress the ability to say, look, even the Jews are divided, and I am on the side of some of the Jews. Let the leaders of J Street take that policy of Menachem Begin to heart and stop dividing Congress and the administration and stand up to support a government of Israel that has more than enough enemies all over the world. When Rabin was in office, I told you, I was in support of him, even though I did not agree with the policies, together with Rabbi Shmuel Golden and Rabbi Eric Yaffe and Rabbi Harlan Wexler and a few other Orthodox, conservative, and Reform lay leaders and rabbinic leaders, maybe some of them may be in the room right now. We formed an organization called Shvil HaZahav, the Golden Mean. Had nothing to do with Rabbi Golden. And the purpose was to be unified in support of the Rabin government and stop the biting. That was, of course, the biting from the right on the left. And now we have the problem of the left and biting the right. So that's the first element of my shlichut, and it's the longest one to describe, so the rest is going to be short. The second element is community involvement and activism. Some of this you heard, and I won't repeat it. Audrey and I spent more than 20 years of our lives deeply involved in the Soviet Jewry movement from 1970 to 1990. I want you to know, I served as chairman of the New York Conference on Soviet Jewry. I was the best chairman they ever had. I was better than Bob Abrams. I was better than Stanley Lowell, Olav Hashalom. I'm trying to remember the others. I was better than all of them. You know why? Because it was while I was chairman, the Berlin Wall came down, and Glasnost took root. Anyway, Audrey and I were in the former Soviet Union 4 times, in 1972, 75, 87, and 89. Moreover, hundreds of members of KJ and parents of Ramaz went to the former Soviet Union, as we did, to help the refuseniks. We got involved. My involvement in the Soviet Jewry movement led me to my academic work for a PhD. I wrote my dissertation with the help and guidance of Elie Wiesel on the subject, Were We Our Brothers' Keepers? The Public Response of American Jews to the Holocaust, 1938-1944. You know what I found? I found that while 6 million Jews were being murdered in Europe, American Jewish life continued pretty much in a normal pattern. The words used by commentators of that era were hakol kenahug, business as usual. Parties went on, vacations were taken, New Year's Eve was celebrated. Very little was done to make American Jews confront the horrible truth of the destruction of our people in Europe. There were no posters on the front walls of synagogues forcing Jews who came to pray to, I'm not talking about outside, inside, forcing Jews who came to pray to confront the calamity that was befalling their brothers and sisters in Nazi Europe. In the last paragraph of my book, I wrote my summary. Quote, the final solution may have been unstoppable by American Jewry, but it should have been unbearable for them. And it wasn't. This is important not alone for our understanding of the past, but for our sense of responsibility in the future. This is in part why Audrey and I feel so strongly about our obligations to UJA-Federation. This is our first charity, our first priority, the community, and all that it does all over the world. We feel privileged to be able to pay a very high tax as our share of all the chesed that UJA-Federation is doing. We do not expect others to pick up the tab for us. We have to do everything we possibly can. This is why I am proud to be on the board of the JDC, where my father of blessed memory was so active, and of which my great-grandfather was a founder, together with Felix Warburg and many others. You go, you'll see there's a big painting, a picture on the wall in the JDC, and right there in the front of the table is a man with a white beard. It's that man, my great-grandfather. Recently, I got an unexpected reward for this part of my shlichut. concerning community involvement and activism. A grandson of mine, David Baruch, at the time a junior in Ramaz, went with a group of 20 Ramaz students over the Saturday night, Sunday, and Monday of President's Weekend. Where did they go? They went to York, Pennsylvania, to work for Habitat for Humanity, an organization which restores homes for poor people. They performed hard labor practically for 48 hours straight until they simply couldn't work anymore, and anyway, they had to get back to New York to go to school on Tuesday. When David came home, I asked him, so what'd you get out of this whole thing? So he answered, there was a guy by the name of John, about 68 years old, who was working with us. And I asked him, John, why do you do this work now that you are retired? He answered me, because there's a job to do. I guess that's what I learned from these 2 days. There's a job to do. I think David's great-great-great-grandfather would have had nachas from that answer, and so would his great-great-grandfather. It was part of his and our shlichut. I have to tell you, just this Sunday, I got another reward. My daughter, Mindy Cinnamon, lives in Atlanta. They're having a rally tomorrow in Atlanta for Gilad Shalit. And she called me up. She said, Daddy, I'm beside myself. We don't have rallies in Atlanta. This is very unusual. And we're having a rally, and a number of synagogues are sponsoring it. And an Orthodox synagogue, a nice Orthodox synagogue, she doesn't go to that synagogue, she goes to another one. That's Jews, you know, whatever. The rabbi wrote, he didn't think it was, although we have to remember Gilad Shalit, we shouldn't go and rally because we shouldn't put pressure on the state of Israel to give away. She said, the Israel consulate is sponsoring this rally. So where's the pressure on Israel? She said, furthermore, my kids go to the yeshiva high school there. So the principal wants to send the seniors. He says the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, for them it's just going to be another time out for, you know, no class. It's not going to have that much meaning to them. I said, what? She said, I knew you were going to say that. She said, Daddy, you got to do something about it. So we talked about it. So she wrote an email to the principal, and I wrote an email to the principal, very respectfully, telling them, listen, even if it's just going to be a social hour, they'll remember 20 years later that they went to a rally for Gilad Shalit and they didn't just simply stay in class. They can accomplish 10 times what they would accomplish in that hour or two in class. I have a motto in Ramaz: don't let school interfere with your education. And this is an example. I also sent an email to the rabbi of the synagogue, trying to make the point, well, I got an email back from her today telling me the whole school is going and the shul is going. That shul, the rabbi sent out another, and she sent me what he sent out. And I said to her, I said, I'm very, very proud of what you did. That was a great, great something or other, granddaughter of the Ramaz. And that's what we learned from him. Finally, my shlichut rests on a principle of centrism. You heard it. A middle-of-the-road philosophy of Orthodox Judaism that embraces the entire community. I believe, and I actually took this quote from the same Rav Aviner. He said, the most important thing is ahavat Yisrael, to love all Jews, especially the Jews you don't agree with. He said, it's no trick to love the Jews you agree with. That's easy. The trick is to love the Jews you don't agree with. That's why I felt very honored to serve as president of the New York Board of Rabbis, whose executive vice president is here, and chair of the National Rabbinic Cabinet of UJA. I believe we have a lot to gain from each other. I have learned from my colleagues in other movements, as I hope they have learned from me. I believe with Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein, the head of Yeshivat Har Etzion in Israel, that there are, and I'm quoting him now, there are rabbis of other groups who are also genuinely in search of the Ribono Shel Olam, the Lord of the universe. And I am happy to learn from them and be inspired by them. It is why it's why we work together in Shvil HaZahav, about which I spoke to you already. And it's why I'm very proud of having Or Zorua in the Ramaz auditorium. Very proud. And I want you to know, I hadn't received one peep from anybody in my congregation. Why are we doing this? It's a conservative synagogue. They're using a microphone. We don't allow that. And nobody has asked me that question because it's basically a no-brainer. I'm actually embarrassed when people will meet me on the street and say, you know, what a nice thing that you... Because what else are you supposed to do with an empty auditorium on Rosh Hashanah but enable another synagogue to pray there? And if they don't pray exactly the way you pray, so they don't. And nobody has ever said, why are we doing this? Besides which, I happen to love Rabbi Wexler. If I weren't an Orthodox Jew and I were looking for a synagogue, I might actually go to Rabbi Wexler. Except I'd have to listen to Sam Klagsbrun speak all the time. He's my friend, but I don't want to hear him speak. Anyway, I'm closing. I have a picture of my mother on the source sheet. I want to say a word about her as I come to a close because she illustrates something of what I was saying. After my father died in 1979, my mother used to call me on the phone to periodically suggest that I talk on Shabbos about this subject or that subject. She was a very, very wise woman. Many of you in this room knew her. And she saw things that she thought I might miss, but that I should be paying attention to and talk about on Shabbos. Are you going to talk about this on Shabbos? Are you going to talk about that? I usually said to her, no, you know. But then I thought about it, and usually I ended up putting it into the sermon. On one occasion, she called me in the office and she said, Haskel, I just saw in the paper that Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan passed away. I think you ought to put in an obituary from KJ. I said, Mother, are you I'm not sure exactly how I put it. My text says, are you sure that I should do this? I might have said it a little bit more sharply. She responded, Haskel, Rabbi Kaplan was a rabbi in our congregation, and I think it is appropriate that you put in an obituary. So I took my mother's advice, and I put in an obituary from KJ signed by me and the president, mourning the loss of a great rabbinic leader in the American Jewish community, which Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan was. After it appeared in the New York Times, I must add, we don't put obituaries in the New York Times anymore. We stopped supporting the New York Times with tens of thousands of dollars a year of obituaries. All right, I'm not looking for applause, but if anybody wants to pick up this part of the shlichut, the mission, you can. And you'll notice the obituary page is much smaller in the last 8 years than it used to be because a lot of synagogues have stopped. In addition to everything else, it probably saves us $40,000, $50,000 a year. I'm not suggesting that Federation should stop. There are reasons for Federation and Yeshiva University to do it, but I don't think synagogues have. Anyway, let me get back to, I'm finishing. After it appeared in the New York Times, I received dozens of letters and calls from conservative and Reconstructionist colleagues, both rabbinic and lay, who said to me, what a nice thing you did in memory of Dr. Kaplan. It was a nice thing, which I might very well not have done were it not for my mother's suggestion. But of course, my mother was the granddaughter of the Ramaz, the man who sat in Temple Emmanuel at Louis Marshall's funeral. He was a man who loved, respected, and worked with all Jews. So what is my shlichut? I have thought about it thanks to you giving me this assignment and tried to describe it as a commitment to Medinat Yisrael, a responsibility to be active in the community, and to have an uncompromising love of all Jews. Am I sure that this is my shlichut, my mission from God? No. But I can only try to do my best. Now the question is, what is your shlichut? Only you can answer that question, and you too can never be sure of the answer. The only thing any of us knows is that we have a mission in this world. An angel gave it to us at birth. Maybe we have many missions, and we justify our lives by fulfilling them. We must look at every day, every decision, every opportunity, every challenge, and every act in that light. We never know what life we can touch and what worlds we can affect. And we should never think we have arrived, because the mission is endless. We are agents of God here, especially we who are here in UJA-Federation, serving the community and the Jewish world. I guess I can sum it all up by advising myself and you to keep our eyes and ears open. And like the prophet Isaiah, when we hear the voice of God saying, "Et mi eshlach, whom shall I send? Umi yelech lanu, and who will go for me?" we should answer, as Isaiah did, Hineni shlacheni. Here I am, send me. Thank you very much.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.